Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are going to get started in just a second. While everyone else is joining, we will just give a few housekeeping tips for the webinar today. First of all, my name is Anna Anderson, and I am an attorney with the National Consumer Law Center, where I work on student loan issues. And I will have our other co-panelists introduce themselves in just a second. But while folks are joining now, I would just like to remind everyone that if you have questions that you want to raise during the webinar today, feel free to do those. You can do that by posting your questions into the Q&A function on the Zoom webinar feature. So feel free to post any questions that you have that come up into the Q&A. We will also try to reserve a few minutes at the end to take questions live from folks who may have issues that come up that they want to raise at the end of the presentation. So with that, let me just get us all started and say that, again, my name is Anna Anderson. I'm from the National Consumer Law Center, NCLC, where I work on student loan issues with my lovely co-panelist, Kira Taylor, and also Josh Rovinger from Legal Aid Society in Cleveland. And we are here today to talk about getting a fresh start on student loans in default. So before we move into our presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Josh and then Kira to introduce themselves.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Rovinger. I'm an attorney over at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland, where we provide free legal services in Northeast Ohio. We do so across a range of areas, including student loans, family law, housing, consumer, employment, and you name it. I'll put a link in the chat if we have anyone in Northeast Ohio who needs legal services.
Awesome. And my name's Kira Taylor. I'm a student loan expert at the National Consumer Law Center, where I work with Anna. And we're really excited to be doing this panel with you today because default is such a big issue for so many student loan borrowers. So with that, Anna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I think we have a poll that we did want to launch. So I think now would be a good time to launch the poll. And thank you to the AARP for taking care of that for us. So our questions, which again are totally anonymous, you will not have any of the information disclosed here. But basically, we just want to know if folks are aware of whether or not they have student loans that are currently in default. If they know for sure they do, or they're not sure, or they know that they don't have student loans in default. We're looking to just see what people's experiences are here with this. And then we also want to see if people already know about the Fresh Start program, which if you don't, that's okay. We're going to make sure that you know quite a bit about it by the time we ended the webinar. So it looks like we've got about a number of folks on the call who know that they have student loans in default, some who are unsure. And then we also have about pretty even, not so even split. Most people have not heard of the Fresh Start program yet. So we're very glad that you're here because we are definitely going to cover that. So you know if this is something you can benefit from, or if you can help other friends or family members you know of who have student loan default issues that are coming up, you can definitely pass this information on to them. And for folks who do already know about the Fresh Start program, don't worry, this is also a very good webinar for you because we're going to go over all the ins and outs. And then we're also going to talk about some other time-limited relief programs that are out there that will help you in the future beyond Fresh Start. So really excited to have you all here today. And thank you for responding to the poll. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now and share the results so folks can take a look at that. And great, awesome. We're going to go ahead and get started. So today, I do want to just mention to folks what we are going to be talking about. So obviously, we're going to talk about how to know if you have student loans in default. Then we're going to go over the new Fresh Start program and how you can utilize that to make sure that you can get your loans quickly and easily out of default, before we then turn over into how to avoid defaulting on student loans in the future. And then finally discussing the other student loan relief and help that is out there. That's something that we want to make sure that everyone knows about, so they can take advantage of if they're eligible. So why are we talking about this now? Well, unless you have not been following the news recently, student loan repayments began again on September 1st. And with the Supreme Court decision that came out in June on President Biden's student loan cancellation plan, a lot of borrowers have questions about the state of their student loans, whether it's their own personal student loans or the loans that their family or friends are dealing with. So now is really something that we want to make sure everyone gets the correct information, because there's a lot of misinformation that's going around out there about how you can respond to your own student loan situation and help others who are dealing with the student loan crisis as well. In addition to all those big news items, there are some really specific time-limited programs like Fresh Start that we want people to take advantage of before they expire. And again, those programs are time-limited. So we're talking about all of this now so that you have this information early so that you can take advantage of it and not miss out on those windows. So the payment pause, this is probably the thing that we are hearing the most about from borrowers right now because they're very anxious about what repayment means. The payment pause ended on September 1st, and that was because of a law that was passed by Congress. So we're going to go over what exactly that means in terms of, repayments restarting and what that will mean specifically for borrowers in default and how it all ties together with the new Fresh Start program. So with repayment restarting on September 1st, what that actually means, you're not going to get your bill right now unless your student loan servicer has already sort of contacted you about what your bill is going to be. The first bills are due in October. So you should get the bill at least 3 weeks before your first payment is due in October. So it could come in the next week. The next few weeks, we've been hearing from loan servicers that the bills actually might come closer to the end of the month. So if you haven't received your first student loan bill yet, do not panic. That will come shortly. But with the payment pause ending on September 1st, what that actually means is that interest is now accruing. So the first bill, again, will be due in October. You'll get that bill sometime in the next couple of weeks. But interest is now accruing again on your student loans. Now, if your loans were in default before the payment pause, what's really critical for you to know here is that your loans will still be in default after September 1st, unless you take steps now or have already taken steps to get those loans out of default. And we're going to definitely talk about how you could do that quickly and easily using Fresh Start. So how to tell if your loans are in default. Now, a number of you answered on our poll that you weren't sure if you had student loans in default. And the good news is there are a lot of easy ways that you can figure out quickly whether or not you have student loans in default. And there's also some things that might suggest to yourself, if you've thought about your own student loan situation, what's happened with your student loans in the past, that will sort of give you a clue as to whether or not your loans may have been in default before the payment pause or even earlier than that. So the status of your loans, this includes default. Depending on your situation, your loans could be in repayment, in a grace period. Now, grace period is for folks who have just recently left school. They get a little bit of a pause before repayments start for them. Your loans could also be in deferment or in forbearance. Now, those are pauses that you may request to have your payments stopped because you may be going through a hardship and you can't afford making payments at the time. The other two types of your status for your student loans that we're going to be really focusing on today are whether or not your loans are delinquent or in default. And what does it mean to be in default or to be delinquent on your student loans? Well, if you're delinquent on your student loans, it means that you've probably missed at least one student loan payment. That is when your loan servicer will say this loan is delinquent. So you're behind on your payments. Your loans, though, are not considered to be in default, your federal student loans, until you miss 9 months of payments. So we're going to talk about all of these programs today only in the context of federal student loans. If you have private student loans, what it means to be in default or to be delinquent on your private student loans, that is totally separate and is going to depend on your private student loan contract. So everything we're talking about today, I just want to make sure people know right off the bat, this only applies to your federal student loans. And that includes the new Fresh Start program and those relief options that we're going to go over at the end of the presentation. So if you have missed 9 months of your federal student loan payments, it is likely that your student loans have been placed in default. Now, how do you know if your loans are in default? Well, if you're not checking your studentaid.gov account regularly, there are some other clues to help you figure out if maybe your loans have been in default in the past. Some of these things include whether or not your tax refunds, your wages, or your Social Security benefits have ever been taken to pay back your student loan debt. Also, if you check your credit reports regularly, you may have noticed a student loan default appearing on your credit report. Now, again, because your credit report would include private student loans and federal student loans, you'd have to make sure that the default that's appearing is your federal student loan that is in default. And really, if any of this has ever happened to you, it's really a good idea to check the status of your loans now, because if they are still in default or they were in default before the pandemic payment pause went into effect, you will need to take steps to get those federal student loans out of default before entering repayment again.
Thanks,
So
Anna.
go ahead.
And just to cut in real quick, just so folks are clear, today we're going to be talking about federal student loan defaults. And so it's possible that you may also have a private student loan that's in default. But today, most people have federal student loans, and we're going to be walking through the steps that you can take for those federal student loans if they're in default as well.
Thank you, Kira. Yeah, and if folks have questions about private student loan defaults, we certainly are happy to answer those in the Q&A. But again, this is all going to cover what you can do to get your federal student loans out of default and back into repayment. So there is a really easy way to find out the status of your federal student loans, as well as to check other really key information on your student loans that you will want to know about going into the next few months. And that is to use studentaid.gov. Now, studentaid.gov is the Federal Department of Education's website where they house all of these wonderful student loan information about resources that you can utilize to deal with your own student loan problems, as well as having your own personal student loan account set up on this website. So you can log into your own personal account on studentaid.gov to get the status of your loans, as well as to find other really important information, such as your loan balance, your loan servicers, how long your loans have been in repayment, who holds your loans, as well as what contact information the Department of Education, your loan servicer, has for you. So studentaid.gov, if folks have not logged in yet to check the status of their loans or to make sure their information is up to date and accurate, we would recommend that you do that right now. And that is something that is really important for you going forward. And a lot of the information we're going to talk to you about today that you need to know, you can find on studentaid.gov. So just to give you a little bit of a sample of what this actually looks like, this is what the studentaid.gov website looks like. So when you go to studentaid.gov, you're obviously going to see a bunch of information here that pertains not only to student loan repayment, but also for folks who are entering college now, information about applying for financial aid and student loans in the future. So to log into your account, we've circled here in red where the login information is located. So when you go to studentaid.gov, it's up on the upper right-hand corner of the page to log into your account. So this is what is going to appear when you click on that button to log in. You'll have to put in your email, your phone number, or your FSA ID username and a password to log in. If you haven't created an account before, you can do that easily right there on this page by clicking Create an Account. When you log in, you will need to set up a two-step verification. This is something that the Department of Education has done recently just to make sure its website is secure. We know this can be annoying, but it is there for your benefit and to protect you and to make sure that no one logs in and uses your information improperly. So the two-step verification you have to set up, you can either do that by text message, that's the SMS verification, or you can set up an email verification. Personally, I do the email verification because I'm almost always logged into my email when I am checking my studentaid.gov account to make sure that I'm getting all the communications that I need. You'll get this little pop-up message before you can actually see your dashboard and your own account that just basically gives you a little bit of a warning that you are using this for your own use and it's not someone else using your account inappropriately or accessing your account inappropriately. So you just have to hit accept And if you have any issues with that, please feel free to put them in the chat. Let us know if you have questions about what that means. But essentially, this is something that just is saying that this is a government website. You're accessing your very personal information here. So once you go on to your studentaid.gov account, you've gone through all of that, you've logged in, you will be taken to your dashboard or your My Aid page. So this is the home page that appears when you are first logging into your own personal account. And you will see there's actually a big pop-up screen right up at the top that will tell you whether or not you have loans in default. And it will tell you the number of loans that you have in default. So again, so up here at the top of this page, it says you have 9 loans in default. Now, many people have more than one federal student loan. Sometimes they have consolidated those federal student loans, but they might still have multiple. This will tell you how many loans you have in default. And this will also be the main page where you can click on other options to see other information about your student loans. If you click on loan breakdown, you will also see your loans are in default on this page. So again, this will show you the loans you have by your loan servicer, and it will tell you whose the loan is serviced by and whether or not it is in default. Again, there's a little red box that will appear that show how many loans you have in default with that servicer. And if you're seeing debt management and collection systems, that is also another indicator that you have a loan in default, because that is a loan servicer that manages defaulted student loans. You can also find out whether or not you have loans in default on another page in your studentaid.gov account. This is the page that you click on that says View Loans by Servicer. Again, this will show you a list of all of the loans that you have, and it will clearly mark whether or not these loans are in default on this page. So again, you'll see that up at the top. And when you click on it, you can click on the individual loans themselves to see whether or not those loans are in default. So what are the consequences of defaulting on your student loans? Why are we even talking about this in the first place? So as I mentioned before, if you default on a federal student loan, the government has a lot of powers to collect on those student loans. They can take your money, and they can do that a lot easier in many cases than private student loan collectors can. So it's really important, if you have federal student loans in default, to take steps to get them out of default so you don't face these collection consequences. You're also not eligible for new federal student loans if you want to go back to school. It can be really hard to do this if you have current federal student loans in default. Having loans in default can also hurt your credit history and your credit score. So if you're applying for loans to get, maybe finance a new car or get a mortgage, having a defaulted federal student loan can be really tough in terms of your credit score. Also, if you default on your loans, collection fees are added and interest continues to accrue. So this means that your balance is going to go up and be higher. And that would make it harder to pay off your student loans over time. So we've talked about the government and how they can collect on defaulted student loans, but I want to make sure that people are really aware of the more common ways that we're seeing this. So the Department of Education can work in conjunction with the IRS to seize your federal tax refunds. So if you have tax refunds and before it goes to you, if you owe on government debt, such as student loans, if you have federal student loans in default, the government can take your tax refund to pay that back. The government can also do an administrative wage garnishment. So they can have your wages garnished and they don't have to take you to court for this. This is something that they can just do if they see that you have student loans in default. They will give you a notice of all of this first, but unfortunately, it can be very tough to challenge those. So once that is in place, it's something that you really want to make sure you're taking steps to sort of prevent that from even happening, because it can be, again, really tough to undo it before your benefits or your wages are taken. If you are retired or if you are on Social Security disability, unfortunately, the government can also collect your Social Security benefits to pay back defaulted federal student loans. And this is something that we see has impacted a number of folks with defaulted student loans. I think the latest numbers I saw were over 100,000 people have had their student loans paid back using a Social Security offset. And that's really devastating if you're living on a fixed income and you need your Social Security check each month to make sure that you're paying your bills ongoing. In some limited cases, the government has sued folks to collect on student loans that they weren't able to collect on through the tax refund or wage garnishment or Social Security program, but that's pretty rare, and we are not seeing that as often now, but it is possible. And if you are sued for a student loan today, it's more likely that you've been sued to collect on a private student loan than a federal loan, but we just want to let folks know that that is possible, and if you're having issues with that, you need to talk to a lawyer right away. So will collections resume now that repayment has restarted? So basically, is the government going to seize tax refunds, take Social Security benefits, or do administrative wage garnishments now that the system has been turned back on? The good news is that the government has said that they are not going to do this at this point in time because they want to make sure that they give folks who are eligible for Fresh Start time to enroll in the program before they start the collection process again. So the pause on student loan collections will continue for loans that are eligible for Fresh Start, and those are loans that defaulted before the pandemic. We'll talk about that a little bit more down the line. So that's all going to be paused through September 30th of 2024. So essentially you have one more year to take advantage of this time to get your loans out of default, get into the repayment plan or into the payment options that work the best for you before that collection activity begins again. So again, it's really the time is right for now to sign up for Fresh Start, look into your other options for dealing with your student loan debt before the collection process turns back on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk about Fresh Start.
Thanks so much, Anna. So I'm really excited to talk about Fresh Start because traditionally there are really limited ways to actually get your federal student loans out of default. Historically, you could only do so by consolidating your loans. So essentially combining all of those loans that you had into a brand new loan. Or doing what's called rehabilitating a loan, which is making a series of payments over a set period of time. And it can take about 10 months to get out of default through that process. But right now, there's this time-limited program that the federal government is offering called Fresh Start. So what is Fresh Start? Fresh Start is a temporary time-limited program for borrowers with defaulted federal student loans to get their loans moved into good standing. Essentially, it's a way to say, we're going to take your loans which are in default, we're going to move them out of default, and we're going to help you get on a path to avoiding default again in the future. The Biden administration announced this policy back in April 2022, and it's going to run until September 2024. So essentially 1 year after the payment after the start of repayment, which, as you know, and as Anna just explained, is in the process of starting up again. Critically, there are no fees or costs to participate in the Fresh Start program. It is entirely free to do so. You just have to take some limited steps that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And so if anyone comes to you and says, we're offering this Fresh Start service, you just have to pay us some money, definitely look at that skeptically because the federal government is not charging any fees or costs to participate in this program. So the benefits of Fresh Start. As Anna was suggesting, some of the benefits are automatic for all borrowers, but they're only going to last until September 2024 if a borrower does not affirmatively opt into Fresh Start. Most importantly, everyone who was in default before the pandemic, they're going to continue to have no collections during this limited time period, regardless of whether they opt into Fresh Start or not. They're also going to temporarily have access to federal financial aid and other federal government loans. But again, if you don't affirmatively opt in, you will only have that restored access until September 2024. Borrowers will still have the ability to rehabilitate their loans in the future should they find themselves in default again. And until September 2024, borrowers will automatically have their loans reported as current rather than as in default, regardless of whether they opt into the Fresh Start program. But we really can't underscore how important it is to affirmatively opt into this program, because if you do so, you get these benefits not for just the short period of time, but you are actually moving your loans out of default and you become eligible for some other benefits that can set you up for success in the future. So you may be wondering, can I enroll in Fresh Start? I was in default. But is my loan one that's eligible for this program? So the key thing to note here is that Fresh Start is available for federal student loans. So again, federal student loans, not private loans. And that's true with respect to the variety of federal student loans that exist. What are called direct loans, or those that are issued directly by the federal government. Those that are called FFEL loans, which come from a bank and can either be held by a bank or another third-party entity, or held by the federal government. And then department-held Perkins loans. No longer being issued, but also a specialized form of loan that if the Department of Education now holds, then your loan would be eligible for Fresh Start. So one question for eligibility is, do you have one of those loans? The other question for eligibility is, when did your loan default? If your loans defaulted before the pandemic started, you are eligible for Fresh Start. If your loans default after the start of the payment, the end of the payment pause, so for instance, if you're in good standing right now and you default in a year from now, those loans will not be eligible for Fresh Start. So how to enroll in Fresh Start? You want to get those benefits beyond September 2024. You want to ensure that your loans are fully out of default. And depending on what type of loan you have, it's either a 1 or 2-step process. It's very, very easy. For most borrowers, for those where the federal government is holding your loan, they're the owner of your loan. And if you go to the federal student aid website that Anna was going through before and look at your loan servicer, and your loan servicer is the default resolution group and the U.S. Department of Education, at the U.S. Department of Education, you're going to be able to enroll in the Fresh Start program through this way. All you do is you call the default resolution group at the number on the screen, and you tell them, I want to use Fresh Start to bring my loans into good standing, and I want to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan so that I can get my loans on a path where I avoid default in the future. When you call in, you'll likely be asked to provide information about your family size, the number of dependents that you have, and your tax filing status. You'll also be asked to provide your annual income level from your most recent federal tax returns. You should call, even if you don't have that tax return on you though, or you didn't file a tax return, you should still call, give them the information that you have when they ask for it, and tell them that you want to use Fresh Start to bring your loans back into good standing. If your loans are held by the Department of Education, and you can apply through the default resolution group, you can also do this online or by sending a letter in the mail, but really calling is the easiest way to go about doing this. For some borrowers though, so borrowers with what are called commercially held FFEL loans. So these are older loans. They would have been issued before 2010. and they are held by a third party called a guarantee agency. Essentially, this third party, and not the U.S. Department of Education, is the one who physically has your loan in their file right now. If you are in that situation, and you will be able to tell either online or in this two-step process by calling federal student aid and asking, you'll want to follow this process to enroll in the Fresh Start program. So the first step is to figure out who your guarantee agency is. Who is the entity that holds this loan of yours? And you can do that online, or you can call the Federal Student Aid Information Line at the number on the screen. Once you find out who the guarantee agency is, you'll get their phone number from FSA, and that's also available online. And then you just do exactly what you would do if you had your loans with the default resolution group. You would just call the guarantee agency. You would say, I want to use Fresh Start to bring my loans into good standing. I want to enroll in an IDR plan, provide them the information, and then your loans will be transferred to the Department of Education and entered into an IDR plan. Perfect. So you've made that phone call. You've told them, I want my loans in good standing. I want that to last beyond September 2024. For those who called the default resolution group because your loans were held by the U.S. Department of Education, the Department of Education is going to take your loan and transfer it to a new loan servicer. And that'll take between 30 and 45 days. And you'll then be able to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, so your monthly payments are tied to your income. For those of you who have to call the guarantee agencies and then have your loans moved to the Department of Education, at that point, they'll be removed from default once the Department of Education gets them back and transferred to a new loan servicer. That'll take a little bit longer than the 30 to 45 days. I don't think we have an exact sense of quite how long that will take right now, which, just again underscores how important it is to call as soon as you can if you're eligible for this program. So once your loans are then at a new loan servicer, you're going to have the same options as everybody else. You're going to be able to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan like President Biden's new SAVE plan. You're going to be eligible for deferments or forbearances and consolidations. One thing to note here is if you applied for a loan discharge application before you applied for Fresh Start. So for example, if you submitted a public service loan forgiveness application or a total and permanent disability discharge application, what the Department of Education is going to do is if they have both your discharge application and your Fresh Start request, they're going to depending on what type of application it is, they're either going to process the application before transferring the loan to a new servicer, or the department's going to inform the new servicer of your pending application, which most likely will mean that your loans will stay in a forbearance or paused status while the servicer and the department decide that loan discharge application. So, kind of key takeaway here, Fresh Start is a time-limited program. Make the phone calls, get the benefits, get your loans out of default. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kira to talk about how to avoid defaulting in the future.
Thanks, Josh. And just before we switch over to my stuff, there was one question that came up, Josh, if you come back on camera for just a sec, about Savvy. And Savvy is not a part of the federal government. That is a separate company. And folks are asking, if they're working with Savvy, do they still need to call to opt into Fresh Start? And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer is a definitive yes. You still need to reach out to the Department of Education to opt into Fresh Start.
Yeah, you'll still want to make that phone call. I would certainly work with the folks at Savvy that you're interfacing with, but you'll still want to, without question, reach out to the department, get those loans out of default.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And just a couple of other things I've seen coming up in the Q&A. Thank you so much for submitting those questions. There's some confusion about the various loan types. We will be doing a session just on the different types of loans next Tuesday. Anna and I talked about it during our last session in August when we were talking about return to repayment, but we'll be talking about it again next Tuesday. So please chime in. I know this is a lot of information and it's a lot to track. So, okay.
Oh, and I just wanted to flag too
Yes.
that we will also share resources that we have for folks that are available online, where you can look online to figure out what types of loans you may have, just in case you can't attend the sessions next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. One other flag. I know Josh mentioned that there are other forms of discharges that you can apply for to cancel your federal student loan debt. You might be asking yourself, what are you talking about? We're not going to be able to cover that today, but I am going to put a website in the chat where you can find more information about the various types of student loan relief that you're entitled to if you have a federal loan, depending on the type of federal loan you have. So you can check that out as well. Okay, so without further ado, you've opted into Fresh Start. You've gotten your loans out of default. And then the next big question is, how do I avoid default in the future? Because if you couldn't afford them before, you might struggle to afford them now. And this is what I'm going to talk about now. So the biggest way that you can avoid default in the future is either by opting into one of these discharge programs and getting your loans canceled, or if you aren't eligible for any of those programs, using an income-driven repayment plan. Now, what is an income-driven repayment plan? That is a plan that calculates your monthly bill based on a percentage of your income, not your loan balance. The default repayment plan that the Department of Education puts you in is designed so that you pay off the entirety of your debt within 10 years. But like I said before, that might not be affordable. Income-driven repayment plans are much more affordable for many people. And for low-income people, you could even have a $0 monthly bill and still have that time count. After 20 or 25 years of repayment, depending on your plan and your loan type, your loans will be canceled. There's also a new income-driven repayment plan called SAVE that could shorten that repayment time period even more. Now, there are multiple types of plans available, and they vary based on your loan type, when the loan was dispersed, and what you borrowed your loans for. So did you borrow them for undergraduate education, graduate education, or did you borrow a Parent Plus loan for your child's education? The most common plans are SAVE, which is this new income-driven repayment plan. We have more information about that plan on our website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org, which I'll put in the chat in just a sec. And then the older plans are PAY, income-based repayment, or IBR, and income contingent repayment, or ICR. Each of them have these acronyms. Each of these plans have slightly different terms and slightly different rules and slightly different eligibility. And so you need to assess which plan is best for you. And you can do that by using the student loans simulator on studentaid.gov. Now, the thing to know is that if you enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, you must recertify your income one time per year because that income is being used to calculate your monthly bill. However, you only have to recertify one time per year. You don't have to recertify just because your income increased, but you can recertify at any time if your income has decreased. In addition, when you apply for an income-driven repayment plan on studentaid.gov, it's easy once you log into studentaid.gov, the department will ask your permission to automatically use your income from your taxes that you submitted to the IRS the prior year, meaning that you won't need to manually recertify. Now, there's a big star here because you want to double check that your income was correctly recertified so that you don't miss that recertification deadline. Another big flag here, Parent Plus loans are not eligible for an income-driven repayment plan unless they're consolidated into a direct consolidation plan. Any direct consolidation loan that contains a Parent Plus loan is only eligible for income contingent repayment, which is the least generous IDR plan. Like I said before, each of these plans have slightly different terms, different ways of calculating the monthly bills, etc. The big caveat here is that if you have a Parent Plus loan and you have loans from your own education, you might think about consolidating them separately. You do not have to consolidate all of your loans together. You can consolidate just one federal student loan into a new direct consolidation loan. Because even if the loans that you had for your own education would have been eligible for a more generous income-driven repayment plan, if they're consolidated together with a Parent Plus loan, that new direct consolidation loan that contains a Parent Plus loan will only be eligible for ICR, or the income contingent repayment plan. Again, I know all of this is confusing. We'll be touching upon this again in our sessions where we'll be talking about the various student loan types next week.
And so, Kira, I think this is probably a question people ask a lot is, can you have two different IDR plans for different loans?
That you can have different types of IDR plans. And so you should consider that as an option, especially if you have a Parent Plus loan that you're considering consolidating into a direct consolidation loan. Now, another thing that comes up for borrowers is that sometimes it's just hard to remember to make the payments. And so if you have a federal loan, you can sign up with your servicer to make auto debits. And then your student loan payment will be automatically deducted from your bank account, and there will be a small interest deduction as well that's applied to your account. One other thing to know, another reason why logging into studentaid.gov is so important is because you can see your student loan servicers. One thing that folks don't realize is that if you have multiple loans from different periods of attendance, or you have loans from your own education and then you borrowed a Parent Plus loan for your child's education, you might have multiple student loan servicers. And this can get very confusing for folks. You can use consolidation to simplify repayment, because when you consolidate your loans, you get to choose who your servicer is. And you can apply to consolidate your loans on studentaid.gov. And again, we have more information about the ins and outs of consolidation as well on our website at studentloanborrowerassistance.org. Another thing to know if you choose to consolidate your loans is that the new loan will be a direct consolidation loan. You are taking out a new federal loan to pay off those older federal loans. It will still be a federal loan that's entitled to the various benefits that are provided to federal student loans. That new direct consolidation loan will have an interest rate that is a weighted average of the interest rates of the loans being consolidated. In addition, the interest rate that had accrued on the prior loans will be added to the principal of the new direct loan. So in that way, you might pay a little bit more on that consolidation loan. Okay, now the cons here and things to be aware of. When you consolidate your loans, it might impact the rules that you're subject to for other forms of statutory relief. There's a small number of folks who may have the rules that would apply if they apply for something called a borrower defense discharge that would change if they consolidated their loans. So that's a flag to be aware of. In addition, though, this is a big pro. If you consolidate your loans before December 31st of this year, you won't lose any qualifying repayment plan on an income-driven repayment plan. Previously, it used to be that if you consolidated your loans, your repayment clock on the income-driven repayment plans would reset, but that is not in effect currently. And even if you consolidate after December 31st of this year, the rules have changed. So your consolidation loan will be credited with a weighted average of the time of the repayment time of the loans being consolidated. So this is just to say the cons of consolidating your loans aren't as severe as they previously were. Okay, so we've covered income-driven repayment. We've touched a little bit on the statutory discharges. And I wanted to make sure that you're aware of other forms of student loan help and relief that are available to you right now. So if you are watching the news, you might have seen that over 800,000 people got cancellation recently. And these were folks who had been in repayment for either 20 or 25 years on their student loans. And the beautiful thing about this is that this is just the first wave of cancellation that's going to be extended to student loan borrowers. And that's because that was all a part of President Biden's one-time payment count adjustment. And we're going to walk through the ins and outs of this payment count adjustment together. But before we do that, I want to rewind a little bit and tell you why this happened. So in 2022, 4.4 million people had been in repayment for 20 years or more, but only 32 had reached income-driven repayment cancellation, which is shocking. Because you're supposed to be able to get to cancellation under the income-driven repayment plans after 20 or 25 years. Similarly, borrowers were struggling to reach public service loan forgiveness cancellation for similar reasons. This was because servicers were failing to tell borrowers in distress about the income-driven repayment plans. Servicers were not giving borrowers accurate information about public service loan forgiveness or the income-driven repayment plans. Servicers were making inaccurate denials and were making errors when they were processing paperwork. And in addition, there were rampant record-keeping errors. So in light of all of these issues, the Department of Education decided to recalculate almost all borrowers' payment histories, and this is called the payment count adjustment. So, nuts and bolts of how this works. Borrowers with any loans that are held by the Department of Education will now get credit for all time in repayment and even some time in deferment or forbearance towards IDR cancellation. This counts any times that your loan was delinquent, but not yet in default. This is true for borrowers whose loans have never been in an income-driven repayment plan. In addition, you can also get credit for qualifying time on loans that were consolidated into a new consolidation loan. So again, those rules around your time resetting are not in place during the payment count adjustment. Now, this is a big flag, though, especially for many of the folks here who may have significant amounts of time in default. That time in default does not count under the payment count adjustment. Similarly, time in an in-school deferment doesn't count, or in a post-school 6-month grace period also will not count. One thing to be aware of, though, is if your loans are in default and you opt into Fresh Start, you will receive credit for the payment pause, but that's only if you opt into Fresh Start, if your loans are eligible for Fresh Start. Another big thing to know, I know we've already gotten some questions about public service loan forgiveness, is that time that counts towards income-driven repayment forgiveness will also count towards public service loan forgiveness cancellation if the borrower had qualifying employment. I'm going to pause here, though, because time that you were in default does not count towards public service loan forgiveness, unfortunately. And I know it's confusing, but folks, we often get questions about the terms of public service loan forgiveness. And so I just want to give you a quick overview. You can get public service loan forgiveness cancellation after 10 years of repayment on your loans. If the same 10 years you were in qualifying public service employment, if you have qualifying loans, direct loans, again, you can consolidate up to the end of December 31st, 2023. To get credit, even if you don't have direct loans. And you also still need to be working in public service to get public service loan forgiveness. All right, some more nuts and bolts for you. So individual loans, not all of your loans will reach cancellation, either based on the terms of the income-driven repayment plan that you enrolled in, or if you've never been enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, after 20 years of repayment, if you only borrowed loans for your undergraduate education, after 25 years of repayment, if you borrowed any loans for your own graduate education, or after 25 years, if you borrowed Parent Plus loans. Now, the nice thing about this is that if you have eligible loans, so if you have department-held loans, you will get this credit automatically, and you'll begin to see your accounts being adjusted over the next year, or you'll get notice that your loans that have reached either that 20 or 25 years of repayment are being canceled. However, there are a couple groups of people that really need to do something before the end of the year. If you have loans that are not held by the Department of Education, such as FFEL or Perkins loans, or if you have an older form of loan called HEAL loans, actually all three of those are older forms of loans, you have to consolidate those loans by December 31st of this year to make sure that those loans benefit from the payment count adjustment. The other big flag is that if you have loans with different amounts of times in repayment, you can consolidate them together so that that direct consolidation loan is credited with the amount with the longest period of repayment on the loans being consolidated. Now, I've also gotten some questions about Parent Plus borrowers. So Parent Plus loans will receive credit towards the IDR, the payment count adjustment, even if they haven't yet been consolidated, even though they wouldn't normally be eligible for an income-driven repayment plan. But to keep earning credit towards income-driven repayment loan forgiveness, you have to consolidate that Parent Plus loan into a new direct consolidation loan. And then you need to sign up for an income contingent repayment plan. And like we talked about before, Parent Plus loans aren't normally eligible for income-driven repayment plans unless they're consolidated. And any direct consolidation loan that contains a Parent Plus loan is only eligible for ICR, the income contingent repayment plan, which is the least generous IDR plan. Direct Parent Plus loans, the thing to know here is that direct Parent Plus loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, but it's really tough to get there unless you've enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan or unless you're getting qualifying time via the payment count adjustment. And so with that, a lot of information, Josh. I'm turning it back over to you.
Yeah, you may be feeling overwhelmed right now. I think that is common. I often am overwhelmed, even just thinking about my own student loans and kind of the options that are out there. I think a few key takeaways for you to think about, though. Number one, check the status of your loans on studentaid.gov, see if they're in default. Number two, if your loans are in default, act now to take advantage of Fresh Start. So you can do it online. Best option, easiest option is to do it by phone with the default resolution group or with your guarantee agency. Also consider consolidating your Fell or Perkins loans into direct loans, and think about signing up for an income-driven repayment plan, such as the new SAVE plan, to get you on a good path moving forward and help avoiding default in the future.
Thank you for that wrap up, Josh. I really appreciate those key takeaways. We talked a lot about our website, where there's a ton of information where you can find, if you can't join us next week for our lunch series to get more info about student loans, you can find a lot of this information in plain language on our website at studentloanborrowerassistance.org. So with that, I want to make sure we have time. We have just a few minutes for questions, and I want to go over some of the questions that we've had in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to open it up. Kira, if you want to take the first couple questions, if there's any questions you saw there that you wanted to answer quickly, I think that would be great.
Sure. So I see that some folks have noticed that their loan account got transferred to a different student loan servicer, and that is right. There were millions of accounts that were transferred from one servicer to another during the payment pause. And so this is another reason that you really need to log into studentaid.gov to see who your servicers are. We'll be walking through all of this next week, and we also walk through this during our last session in August. And so a video of that session will also be coming out. So even if you miss the session next week, there will be recordings that are forthcoming that will walk you through how to look at studentaid.gov.
And thanks, Kira, for putting the studentloanborrowerassistance.org website in the chat. I wanted to answer very quickly. There's some questions coming up in the Q&A about taking out other loans, home equity loans or personal loans to pay off Parent Plus loans because of interest rates being better. I would just like to say we're really strongly cautioning people against that. As difficult it is to deal with the federal student loan system, there is a lot that's happening here. And if you refinance your federal student loans into a private student loan or some other type of private loan, you're going to lose out on all of the protections and benefits that the federal student loan system offers currently. So that includes the cancellation through the payment count adjustment that a lot of folks who've been paying on their loans for a really long time are going to start getting closer to. But it also includes future cancellation. And right now, even though the Supreme Court struck down President Biden's cancellation plan, the Department of Education is working on a new plan to try to offer new relief to student loan borrowers through a different process. So if you refinance your loans into a private loan, you're going to lose out on all of that. There's no undoing that. And so that's something that we want to caution people against. There's also a lot of great protections in the federal student loan system that if you are struggling with your payments, if you can't make payments going forward, you're going to get better options for dealing with that in the federal student loan system than with a private lender. Another thing is we've been hearing about variable interest rates with private loan refinancing. So folks who think that they're getting a great interest rate now and sign up when it's a 3% interest rate, we'll see that interest rate spike to 19%. So that is something that you want to be very cautious about. There were some questions in the chat too, Kira, about the IDR payment count adjustment and whether or not that 20 to 25 year discharge rate starts after you start making repayments, or if there's that's something that's going to be counted towards previous time as well.
Great question. It is not when the loan is dispersed, because normally the person is in school, they've got an in-school deferment, and then they would have a post-school 6-month grace period. So the loans wouldn't be in repayment then. As soon as the loans are in repayment, that time counts. You don't have to make a payment though, because time that is delinquent when you're not making a payment also counts under the the payment count adjustment. Normally within the income driven repayment plans, you do have to make a payment for that month to count under that plan.
There's a question in here about co-signing on payments on student loans. If traditionally in the federal student loan system, there are not co-signers on student loans. So if someone has actually co-signed on a student loan, it is likely a private student loan that has been co-signed for. There is some confusion here though with Parent Plus loans. So parents who take out student loans to help pay for their child's education, that's not a co-signer. Unfortunately, that is the parent's loan. That is not the student's loan, that is the parent's loan. So there's a little confusion there about whether something is truly a federal student loan with a cosigner or if it's a private student loan. But if you've co-signed on a loan for someone who's not your child, it's likely that it's going to be a private student loan. And unfortunately, these relief options don't apply. We have information about private student loans on our website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org. But it's also something that I think there's a lot of questions on, and we hopefully would get the opportunity to come back here and talk to folks about that too. Josh and Kira, any questions you want to answer?
So I see another question here that I'm going to send over to you, Josh, because I'm sure you handle this a lot with your clients. So someone has asked, they logged into studentaid.gov and it says that their balance is 0. Is their balance actually 0? Can they trust that amount, or they didn't receive notice? What's going on here?
Yeah, so 2 separate things I would suggest. The first is I would go into the account because you'll want to see kind of the specific loan breakdown to see if that 0 amount is actually accurate. And then number 2, that'll only obviously show any federal student loans on studentaid.gov. And so to the extent you have any private loans on top of that, that would not be shown within studentaid.gov.
Awesome. I would also say just one additional thought, Anna, about that trade-off when you're thinking about refinancing your loans. You're definitely going to want to take a look at your discharge options. And that was the link, the second link from the bottom here in the chat, that provides you with a summary of the different repayment plans. There was also a question about what to do if your school has closed. The closed school discharges are also covered in this link here, but we won't have enough time to dive into that today.
As well as for folks who had loans taken out for them, they did not certify or benefit from. If you're a victim of some type of like identity theft or fraud, there are ways to respond to that with certain discharge programs. So you want to look into all of those options. I think there's a question about applying for the SAVE plan. Kira, Josh, do you want to answer how does one go about actually applying for the SAVE plan?
So Josh, I can hand that one over to you.
Sure. So you'll want to do it you can either do it through the Office of Federal Student Aid directly. There's an online application where you can go through and even just, connect your income information directly to the department, give it to the Department of Education. You can also do it through your loan servicer or by calling your loan servicer or the Office of Federal Student Aid. So you have a wide range of options to try and enroll in the SAVE program.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who have questions or issues that come up with their student loans, studentaid.gov has information about filing complaints. So if you have complaints about PSLF and how your loan servicers handled that, or complaints about how people are being told what payment plans they're eligible for, definitely consider filing a complaint with the Student Loan Ombudsman. That information is on the studentaid.gov website, but we also have information on our website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org. So with that, I think we have to wrap up and end this, but thank you very much, everyone. It's been a great session, and we hope to see many of you next week.